12 men walked into gyms across America and Europe during the 1970s, carrying nothing but discipline, food, and an obsession with iron. No confirmed pharmaceutical advantages. No modern shortcuts. Just forgotten natural legends who built physiques so shocking that people still debate whether it was even possible. These are the craziest natural physiques of all time, muscle mass before the drug era, forged in basement gyms with methods the industry tried to bury. Old-school bodybuilding secrets that turned ordinary men into walking slabs of granite. By the end of this story, you'll discover the one training principle all 12 share that modern bodybuilders have completely abandoned. But first, we need to meet the strength mystic who bent steel bars with his bare hands and made a career out of proving the human body could become indestructible. Mike Dayton, the natural strength mystic. Mike Dayton didn't look like a bodybuilder. He looked like a problem. While guys in Venice were hitting poses for tourists, Dayton was breaking chains on live television. Handcuffs, steel bars, coins bent between his fingers like they were made of clay. This wasn't bodybuilding. This was proof that the nervous system could turn flesh into armor if you knew how to unlock it. He trained in dark gyms where nobody talked, where breathing mattered more than reps, where every set felt like meditation mixed with violence. Dayton studied martial arts. He read about Qi. He combined Eastern focus with Western iron and created something the magazines didn't know how to categorize. In 1977, he entered the first ever World's Strongest Man competition during the wrist roll event, a brutal test where you wind a rope around a drum to lift 100 pounds. Dayton refused gloves. The skin tore off his palms. Blood dripped onto the platform. He kept winding. He won the event. Afterward, reporters asked why he didn't stop. He said pain was just information, and he chose not to listen. People who trained with him remember squats that defied logic. They remember a man who treated his body like a weapon he was constantly sharpening. No trophies lined his wall. No Olympia stage. Just raw, undeniable strength and a belief that the mind could rewrite the body's limits. But if Dayton was the mystic, the next man was pure Viking mythology made real. Andreas Kalling, the Swedish warrior. Andreas Kalling walked into Venice Beach in the mid-70s looking like he'd sailed straight out of a Norse saga. Long blonde hair, full beard, shoulders wide enough to block doorways, arms thick as ship rope, a waist so tight it looked like someone carved it from oak. He wasn't just muscular, he was mythological. And the wildest part, before he ever touched a barbell, Kalling was a judo champion. He'd trained in Japan, competed internationally, learned discipline on mats where one mistake meant you hit the ground hard. When he transitioned to bodybuilding, he brought that same relentless structure with him. Kalling didn't bulk and cut like modern athletes. He stayed photo-ready year-round. Magazines loved him because you could call him on a Tuesday and shoot him on Thursday, no prep needed. That kind of conditioning requires a level of daily discipline most people can't imagine. Every meal measured, every training session logged, no cheat days, no shortcuts. Just a man who treated his body like a temple he refused to desecrate. In 1976, he appeared on The Gong Show, a chaotic TV talent show, and hit a vacuum pose that made the audience gasp. Under cheap stage lights, in front of people who'd never seen a bodybuilder live. Kalling looked like a statue that had learned to breathe. He proved you could build size and detail without pharmaceutical assistance if you were willing to live like a monk. But while Kalling looked like art, the next man looked like comic book panels come to life. Robbie Robinson, the Black Prince. Robbie Robinson earned his nickname the hard way. Born in the Deep South, raised in Florida, Robinson landed in Gold's Gym Venice during the Golden Age and immediately became the guy everyone watched. Not because he was loud, because when he trained, the room changed. His shoulders looked like cannonballs welded to his frame. His arms had a cobra-like shape, deep cuts in the brachialis that made them look three-dimensional even when he was just walking. And his waist stayed tight, giving him that classic V-taper bodybuilders today would kill for. He trained with volume that would hospitalize modern athletes. Endless curls, rows until his lats cramped, presses that never seemed to stop. Then, after destroying his muscles, he'd practice posing for hours. Not casual flexing, full theatrical routines, hitting every angle, controlling every muscle fiber. The Pumping Iron documentary caught glimpses of this obsession. Cameras followed him through golds as he worked alongside Arnold and the other legends. And even in that crowd of freaks, Robinson stood out. People who trained with him in the mid-70s still argue about how he built that physique. High volume, relentless intensity, mountains of meat, eggs, and rice, basic supplements. No fancy formula, just brutal consistency and genetics that responded to punishment like clay in a sculptor's hands. He insisted later in life on clean living and longevity, and many fans believe his early look proves how far the human body can go when pushed correctly. But if Robinson looked like a superhero, the next man looked like he'd been designed by scientists. Tony Pearson, the symmetry prodigy. Tony Pearson's childhood was a nightmare. Moved between relatives who couldn't care for him, eventually placed in a state group home. The kind of early life that breaks people. But in high school, a wrestling injury led him to weight training as rehab, and something insane happened. He grew muscle faster than anyone had ever seen. His body responded to iron like it had been waiting for permission. At 17, a coach named George Turner saw him in Missouri and said 5 words that changed everything. "I can make you a champion." By 19, Pearson was in Venice, walking along Muscle Beach one morning. He caught Arnold Schwarzenegger's attention. Arnold took him under his wing, taught him posing, introduced him to the right people. In 1978, at just 21 years old, Pearson won the AAU Mr. America, one of the youngest ever. His physique was absurd. Shoulder-to-waist ratio that looked photoshopped. A vacuum so sharp you could see his spine through his ass. Arms and delts that exploded out his frame, but never looked blocky or overdone. They called him the Michael Jackson of bodybuilding because of his looks and the way he moved on stage, fluid, controlled, artistic. He later pioneered mixed pairs posing and won 6 world titles with different partners, proving his body wasn't just built for photos, but for performance. Pearson's story asks an uncomfortable question. If a kid from a group home could walk into a gym and build one of the cleanest physiques of the 1970s in just a few years, what does that say about natural potential? But while Pearson's body screamed clean precision, the next man sparked debates that still haven't been settled. Serge Nubret, the Black Panther. Serge Nubret looked like a panther wrapped in human skin. Paper-thin, razor-sharp, huge. He stood on stage at the 1975 Mr. Olympia, the Pumping Iron year, and placed second, losing to Arnold but looking more aesthetic than men 30 pounds heavier. His waist was impossibly small. His chest looked like armor plating. His quads swept out like wings. And his skin was so tight that every muscle fiber showed through, even relaxed. Fans who saw him live said he didn't look real. Here's where it gets controversial. Nubret trained like a machine possessed. 20 to 30 sets per body part, sometimes more, 6 days a week. Barely any rest between sets. Then hundreds, sometimes over 1,000, reps of work daily. His training volume alone should have destroyed him, but he also ate like a wild animal. Reports claim he consumed 6 to 8 pounds of meat every day, horse meat early on. Later, mountains of beef with rice and beans. He treated food like fuel and shoveled it in with the same relentless rhythm he used in the gym. Many fans still argue about whether Nubret's physique was achievable without modern enhancements. No confirmed evidence exists. He emphasized his extreme methods, the food, the volume, the schedule, and left people to wonder. Some say his genetics were 1 in a million. Others say the math doesn't add up. The debate continued. But one thing nobody argues: Nubret proved that a man could be massive and shredded at the same time, and that image changed bodybuilding forever. Yet the next man proved that being a tank had nothing to do with size. Frank Zane, the midpoint twist. Frank Zane weighed 185 pounds on stage and beat men who outweighed him by 50. 3-time Mr. Olympia. 1977, 1978, 1979. 5'9", lighter than almost everyone he competed against. But when the judges looked at him under the lights, they saw perfection. Not mass, not freaky size. Just every line sharpened to a blade's edge, every muscle in perfect proportion, every pose held with the control of a man who had studied his body like a scientist. Which makes sense, because Zane was literally a chemistry teacher. They called him the chemist. He approached bodybuilding like a lab experiment. Pyramid training with moderate weights, perfect form, meticulous logs of every set, rep, and meal, controlled calories, precise protein and carb ratios, egg whites, chicken, yogurt, salads. He even practiced meditation and visualization, sitting in quiet rooms and mentally rehearsing poses before hitting them physically. While other guys were slamming weights and eating everything in sight, Zane was measuring, tracking, and refining. He proved something the muscle magazines didn't want to admit. You don't need to be the biggest to be the most overpowering. Zane looked bulletproof in a different way. Every muscle had detail. Every pose had purpose. Judges couldn't find a weak point. He was a thinking man's tank, a physique built not by brute force, but by precision, patience, and relentless control. And after Zane proved that science could beat size, the next man took that lesson and became a legend by thinking 5 steps ahead of everyone else. Boyarko, the Raging Cajun. Boyarko didn't just train. He studied. Born in Louisiana, nicknamed the Raging Cajun, Cole won Mr. America and Mr. Universe in 1969 and spent the next 2 decades refining his craft. But what separated him from the pack wasn't just his thick arms and dense torso. It was the way he thought about training. While other bodybuilders followed routines handed down from the previous generation, Cole questioned everything. He worked closely with Arthur Jones, the inventor of Nautilus machines, testing new equipment and high-intensity methods. Jones once joked that his machines could build lats on a garden rake, and Cole was a proof. But Cole didn't just blindly follow trends. He studied recovery. He analyzed programming. He kept detailed notes on what worked and what didn't, adjusting his approach based on data, not ego. In a sport dominated by more is better, Cole asked, what if smarter is better? His physique reflected that philosophy, dense, balanced, powerful without looking sloppy. He didn't have the flashiest symmetry or the biggest arms, but he had substance, thickness, the kind of muscle that looks like it could move mountains. His career spanned decades, over a dozen major titles, competitions into his 40s, and through it all, he maintained a reputation as the guy who could explain why something worked, not just that it did. Cole proved that intelligence and discipline could build a tank just as effectively as blind aggression. But while Cole was a thinking man's bodybuilder, the next man was a teenage wrecking ball. Ron Teufel, the Teen Titan. Ron Teufel walked into gyms as a teenager and made grown men feel inadequate. 5'6", teenage Mr. America, teenage Mr. USA. By the time he was old enough to vote, he'd already won the 1978 AAU Mr. California and AAU Mr. USA. His abs looked like they'd been carved from granite with a chisel. His arms and delts exploded out of his compact frame with a density that didn't seem possible for someone his age. Magazine covers in 1976 and 1977 screamed Teen Titan across photos of his midsection, and older lifters couldn't believe what they were seeing. Teufel's physique proved something uncomfortable. In the 1970s, some teenagers were already walking around with bodies that most adults spend a lifetime chasing. How? Genetics that responded to volume like a sponge soaking up water. Training with intensity that bordered on reckless. A willingness to push past pain that would make most people quit. But Teufel's story carries a shadow. He lived hard, made risky choices, struggled with personal issues that those close to him knew were dangerous. He passed away in his mid-40s, far too young, leaving behind a legacy wrapped in both admiration and sadness. You can't talk about natural 70s tanks without mentioning Teufel. He represents the raw, almost brutal potential of the human body when pushed early and hard. But his story is also a reminder that building a tank isn't the same as protecting it. While Teufel was a compact powerhouse, the next man was a literal giant who became one of cinema's most iconic villains. David Prowse, the Darth Vader powerhouse. David Prowse stood 6'6" and weighed over 280 pounds in his prime. Before he became the physical presence of Darth Vader, Prowse was a British weightlifting champion. He represented England at the Commonwealth Games. He deadlifted weights most men couldn't budge. Reports claim lifts up to 785 pounds. He was also one of the first men after the original lifters to successfully hoist the legendary Denny Stones in Scotland, two massive granite boulders that have humbled strongmen for over a century. Prowse didn't just look strong. He was strong in ways that made weightlifting federations pay attention. But his size also made him perfect for playing monsters and thugs on British TV and film. Tall, wide, intimidating. When George Lucas needed someone to fill the Darth Vader suit, Prowse's sheer physical presence sold the menace. The slow, deliberate walk, the way he towered over other actors, the sense that this character could crush you without effort. All of that came from decades of moving heavy weight and building a frame that looked like it belonged to mythology, not a gym. Prowse's foundation was Olympic lifting and strongman work, disciplines that existed long before modern bodybuilding extremes. His physique was built on functional strength, not aesthetics. He's proof that the term tank doesn't always mean shredded abs and stage-ready conditioning. Sometimes it just means a man so large and powerful that filmmakers put him in a black suit and made him a most feared villain in cinema history. But while Prowse was a giant, the next man was a cautionary tale wrapped in muscle. Dennis Tenorino, the Brooklyn Phoenix. Dennis Tenorino decided to become a champion at 12 years old when he realized how skinny he was. Born in Brooklyn in 1945, Tenorino grew up in a tough neighborhood where weakness got you hurt. He found mentors like Joe Abenda and Bill Pearl, who refined his training and taught him discipline. By his late teens and early 20s, he was collecting titles. Teen Mr. America, Mr. Atlantic Coast, Mr. East Coast, Mr. Brooklyn. In 1968, he won NABA Mr. Universe in the tall class. By the mid-70s, he'd added Mr. World, multiple universe wins, and in 1978, both Mr. America and Pro Mr. Natural America, a contest explicitly marketed as steroid-free. At 6 feet and 220 pounds contest ready, Tenorino had sweeping lines, a deep chest, and a narrow waist that gave him a classic, powerful look. But his life story is heavier than his physique. He drifted into criminal involvement, made dangerous choices, got tangled in a lifestyle that nearly destroyed him. Then something shifted. Tenorino had a dramatic personal transformation, walked away from that world, and rebuilt himself as an evangelist and motivational speaker. He spent the rest of his life telling crowds how he almost lost everything and chose to start over. Tenorino's body was a tank, but his story proves that building muscle is easy compared to rebuilding a life. He represents the 70s bodybuilder who survived both the iron and the darkness, emerging as proof that discipline can be redirected toward redemption. While Tenorino rose from the wreckage, the next man turned the gym into an empire. Pete Grimkowski, the Gym King. Pete Grimkowski looked like a bridge between two eras. Thick chest, heavy delts, big arms, back, so wide it looked like he could carry buildings. He competed through the 70s and early 80s, winning Mr. America and Mr. World, holding his own against guys who were starting to push the boundaries of size. Grimkowski represented the tail end of the classic era and the beginning of the mass monster age, a guy who had old-school lines but new-school thickness. But what made Grimkowski a legend wasn't just his physique. It was what he did after stepping off the stage. In 1979, he became the owner of Gold's Gym, taking over from Ken Sprague and guiding it through the 80s and 90s as it exploded into a global brand. He launched Grimco supplements, built businesses, turned a single Venice Beach iron dungeon into a worldwide empire. He lived inside that gym as both competitor and boss, surrounded daily by the best lifters on the planet, absorbing knowledge and pain in equal measure. Grimkowski's look came from brutal, heavy training in the heart of bodybuilding's most famous temple. He proved you could be massive without looking cartoonish if you built your foundation with basic lifts, endless volume, and constant exposure to greatness. While modern bodybuilders chase exotic supplements and advanced protocols, Grimkowski just lived in the best gym in the world and refused to leave until he looked like one of the weights. But if Grimkowski was built by immersion, the final man was built by a system. Bob Guida, the clean-cut tactician. Bob Guida won Mr. America in 1966 with a physique built by a training method nobody else was using: peripheral heart action, FA, a circuit-style approach Guida popularized where you alternate upper and lower body exercises with zero rest, keeping your heart rate elevated and your muscles constantly engaged. Sessions started with a 1-mile jog, then multiple circuits of multi-joint lifts, squats to presses to rows without stopping. The goal wasn't just size. It was muscle, conditioning, and leanness all at once. Bodybuilding met cardiovascular torture in a basement at the Duncan YMCA in Chicago, where Guida trained alongside legends like Sergio Oliva. Guida was the clean-cut Mr. America, methodical, disciplined, scientific before science was trendy. While other guys were grinding through endless sets with no plan, Guida had circuits written on a chalkboard and a stopwatch in his hand. His physique reflected that precision, balanced, detailed, powerful without excess. He looked like a tank because every ounce of muscle had been placed there with intention, not luck. He proved that clever programming could rival pure aggression, that thinking through your training could build a body just as effectively as blind volume. Guida represented the tactician, the guy who showed up with a plan, executed it perfectly, and walked away with a trophy while everyone else was still figuring out their second exercise. In a decade full of meatheads, Guida was a professor, and his body was a dissertation. 12 men, 12 completely different paths to the same destination. Physiques so shocking that people still debate whether they were even possible. Mike Dayton bent steel. Andreas Colling looked like a Viking. Robbie Robinson became comic book art. Tony Pearson escaped hardship and built symmetry. Serge Nubret sparked arguments that never ended. Frank Zane proved precision beat size. Boyer Coe thought his way to legend status. Ron Teufel dominated as a teenager. David Prowse became Darth Vader. Dennis Tenorino rebuilt himself from wreckage. Pete Grimkowski turned a gym into an empire. Bob Guida built a tank with circuits and discipline. The one thing they all shared, they treated their bodies like long-term projects, not short-term experiments. They built slowly. They ate mountains of real food. They trained with a focus that bordered on obsession. And they did it in an era when the shortcuts didn't exist yet, or at least weren't confirmed. These are the forgotten natural warriors. The men who proved that muscle mass before the drug era was a myth. It was a choice. A brutal, relentless, years-long choice. And somewhere in a basement gym right now, another natural legend is being forged. You just don't know their name yet.